Hello friends, welcome to Smiley Stories. Please do subscribe for more videos. Martin Luther King Jr. A Peaceful Leader by Sarah Albee. Pictures by Chin Ko. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in 1929. He and his family lived in a pretty yellow house in Atlanta, Georgia. His father was a minister. There were lots of bugs at home. Young Martin was a happy child. But as he grew older, he realized that black people and white people were not treated the same way. Once, Martin's father took him to buy new shoes. The white salesman asked them to move to the back of the store. They left. Another time, Martin accidentally stepped on a white lady's toe. She slapped him and called him a bad name. He did not react with anger. He believed that bravery meant peacefully standing your ground. At home, Martin learned to listen, ask questions, and speak up. He finished high school in just 2 years. He went to college at age 15. Then he continued his studies. Should he be a lawyer, a doctor, perhaps a professor? Martin chose to become a minister like his father and grandfather. He earned his PhD and became Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In the United States in the 1950s, black people and white people were still not treated as equals. Separating black people and white people was known as segregation. In some states, there were separate and not as nice bathrooms, playgrounds, and schools for black people. Black people had to give up their bus seats for white passengers. Dr. King and his new wife, Coretta, moved to Montgomery, Alabama. He had a job as a pastor at a church. His words were powerful. He was a natural leader. He joined the civil rights movement. Other black leaders were impressed by the young preacher. They thought he would be a good person to help lead their cause. Then a moment came where Dr. King felt he could make a difference. A woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus. She was arrested. This was in 1955. It happened in Montgomery. Dr. King and other civil rights leaders organized a protest. Dr. King urged black people to stop riding the city's buses. For 381 days, most black people stopped riding buses to work. They walked and carpooled. Dr. King walked with them. The protest worked. The Supreme Court ruled that buses in Montgomery would no longer be segregated. Dr. King helped change the law. He had changed it peacefully. Under Dr. King's leadership, the civil rights movement grew. Black people bravely sat down in whites-only restaurants. Black children bravely attended whites-only schools. Black people and white people marched together. They kept protesting unfair laws, and they did it peacefully. Some people were afraid of what would happen if laws were changed. Some were so angry they shouted, set fires, and beat protesters. Once, a bomb went off on Dr. King's porch. Dr. King and other leaders were arrested many times. Dr. King showed everyone how to stand up for what is right. Peaceful protest took courage. In 1963, thousands of people marched in Washington, D.C. Dr. King gave a powerful speech. The world watched him on TV. In 1964, Dr. King won the Nobel Peace Prize, a reward for his work to create fairness without violence. Then, one day in 1968, a white man shot Dr. King. Dr. King died the next day. Millions mourned him. Dr. King had known he might not live to see liberty and justice for all, but he believed there were things worth dying for. Dr. King's courage and his love, his ability to lead and to be heard, would live on. In his short lifetime, Dr. King changed the way people saw one another. The end. Here's a timeline of Dr. King. In 1929, Martin Luther King Jr. is born in Atlanta, Georgia. Martin is 10 in this family photo. In 1948, King graduates from Morehouse College. In 1953, King marries Coretta Scott. In 1955, Rosa Parks is arrested for refusing to give up her bus seat. In 1963, Dr. King leads a peace march in Washington, D.C. and delivers a speech that millions of people would remember. In 1964, Dr. King receives the Nobel Peace Prize. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act is passed, making it illegal to treat people unfairly. In 1968, Dr. King is assassinated. In 1983, the third Monday of January becomes Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a national holiday. Martin Luther King Jr. and his young family. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott married in 1953. They had 4 children. Yolanda was born in 1955, Maudie in 1957, Dexter in 1961, and Bernice in 1963. Here are Martin and Coretta with Yolanda. Coretta Scott King had earned a degree in voice and violin from a famous music school. After her husband's death, she spent much of her life working for peace and injustice. Here's Martin throwing a ball to Maudie. In the next picture, the family prays before eating Sunday dinner. There's a picture of Gandhi over the doorway. Mahatma Gandhi was a leader from India who believed in peaceful protest. Dr. King admired him greatly. Peaceful protest. Like his hero Gandhi, Dr. King led peaceful protests. It wasn't easy. He was arrested 30 times. Protests included marches, boycotting buses, sitting down at whites-only lunch counters in restaurants, and helping black children go to formerly whites-only schools. In the picture below, the carpooling during the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. African American students sitting at a lunch counter to protest segregation. Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders marched in Washington, D.C. in 1963. The Civil Rights Protest marched from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama in 1965. Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders escorting African American children to their newly integrated school in Mississippi. Dr. King in jail in 1967. Through powerful words and peaceful actions, Dr. King became America's greatest champion of fairness and justice for all.
Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, share and consider subscribing.